Hello, this is a practice log, probably two. I don't know. Today I'm going to be reading the third book of the Broken Earth trilogy. So if you don't want spoilers, you've been warned. And this is my excuse to read this book because I've been wanting to for a while. So here we go. Time grows short, my love. Let's end with the beginning of the world, shall we? Yes, we shall. It's strange, though, my memories are like insects fossilized in amber. They are rarely intact, these frozen, long-lost lives. Usually, there's just a leg, some wing scales, a bit of a lower thorax, a hole that can only be inferred from fragments, and everything blurred together through jagged, dirty cracks. When I narrow my gaze and squint into memory, I see faces and events that should hold meaning for me. And they do. They don't. The person who witnessed these things firsthand is me, and yet not. In those memories, I was someone else, just as the stillness was some world else. Then and now, you and you. Then this land, was three lands. Though these are virtually the same position as what we will someday be called the stillness, repeated seasons will eventually create more ice at the poles, sinking the sea, making your Arctics and Antarctics larger and colder. Then, though, now, it feels of now as I will call myself of then. This is what I mean when I say this, that it is strange. Now, in this time before the stillness, the far north and south are decent farmland. What you think of as the western coastals is mostly wetland and rainforests. Those will die out in the next millennium. Some of the nomad lats doesn't yet exist, and will be created by volcanic infusion over several thousand years of eruptive pulses. The land that becomes Palila, your hometown, doesn't exist. Not so much change, all things considered, but then now is nothing ago, tectonically speaking. When we say that the world has ended, remember, it is usually a lie. The planet is just fine. What do we call this lost world, this now, if not the stillness? Let me tell you, first, of a city. It is a city built wrong by your standards. This city sprawls in a way that no modern calm would be permitted to do so, since that would require too many miles of walls. And this city's outermost sprawls have branched off along rivers and other lifelines to spawn additional cities. Much in the manner of mold forking and stretching along the rich veins of a growth medium, too close together, you would think, too much overlap of territory that are too connected. These sprawling cities and their making spawn, each unable to survive should it be cut off from the rest. Sometimes they have distinct local names, these child cities, especially where they are large or old enough to have spawned child cities of their own. But this is superficial. Your perception of their connectedness is correct. They have the same infrastructure, the same culture, the same hungers and fears. Each city is like the other cities. All of the cities are effectively one city. This world, in this now, is the city's name, Sail Ingst. Ingst. Can you truly understand what a nation is capable of, child of the stillness? The entirety of old sands, once it finally stitches itself together from fragments of the hundred civilizations that live and die between now and then, will be nothing by comparison. Merely a collection of paranoid city-states and communes agreeing to share, sometimes for survival's sake. Ah, the seasons will reduce the world to such miserly dreams. Here now, dreams have no limit. The people of Sail Ingst have mastered the forces of matter and its composition. They have shaped life itself to fit their whims. They have so explored the mysteries of the sky that they have grown bored with it and turned their attention back toward the ground beneath their feet. And Sail Ingst lives, oh how it lives in bustling streets, ceaseless commerce, the buildings that your mind would struggle to define as such. The buildings have walls of patterned cellulose that can barely be seen beneath leaves, moss, grasses, and clusters of fruit or tubers. Some rooftops fly banners that are actually immense, unfurled fungus flowers. The streets teem with things that you might not recognize as vehicles, except in that they travel and convey. Some crawl on legs like massive arthropods, some are little more than open platforms that guide on a cushion of resonant potential. Ah, but you do not understand this. Let me say only that these vehicles float a few inches off the ground. No animals draw them, no steam or chemicals fuel them. Should something, a pet or child perhaps, pass underneath it, it will temporarily cease to exist, then resume on the other side. With no interruption of velocity or awareness, no one thinks of this as death. There is one thing you would recognize here, standing up from the core of the city. It is the tallest, brightest thing for miles. Every rail and path it connects to it in some way or another. It's your old friend, the amethyst obelisk. It is floating not yet, it sits not quite quiescent in its socket, and now and again it pulses in a way that will be familiar to you from Elia. This healthier pulse than that was, the amethyst is not the damaged dying garnet. Still, if the similarity makes you shiver, that's not an unhealthy reaction. All over the three lands, wherever there is a large enough node of Solangst, an obelisk sits at the center of each. They dot the face of the world, 256 spiders and 256 webs, feeding each city being fed in turn. Webs of life, if you want to think of them that way. Life, you see, is sacred in Solangst. Now imagine, surrounding the base of the amethyst, a hexagonal complex of buildings. Whatever you imagine will look nothing like the actuality. But just imagine something pretty, and that will do. Look closer at this one, here, along the southern western rim of the obelisk, the one on a slanting hillock. There are no bars on the building's crystal windows, but a visual of faint, darker lacing of tissue over the clear material. In Matosis, a popular method of securing windows against unwanted contact. Although these exist only on the outward-facing surface of the windows, to keep intruders out. They sting but do not kill. Life is sacred in Solangst. Instead, there are no guards on the doors. Guards are efficient in any case. The fulcrum is not the first institution to have learned an eternal truth of humankind. No need for guards when you can convince people to collaborate in their own interment. Here is a cell within the pretty prison. Doesn't look like one now. Doesn't look like one I know. There's a beautiful sculpted piece of furniture that you might call a couch, though it has no back and consists of several pieces arranged in clusters. The rest of the furniture is common stuff you would recognize. Every society needs tables and chairs. The view through the window is of a garden on the roof of one of the other buildings. At this time of day, the garden catches sunlight slanting through the great crystal, and the flowers growing in the garden have been bred and planted with this effect in mind. Purple light paints the paths and beds, and the flowers seem to grow faintly in reaction to the color. Some of these tiny white flower lights wink out now and again, which makes the whole flower bed seem to sparkle like the night sky. Here is a boy staring through the window and winking at the winking flowers. He's a young man, really, superficially mature in an ageless sort of way, not so much stocky as compact is in his design. His face is wide and cheeky, his mouth small. Everything about him is white, colorless skin, colorless hair, ice-white eyes, his elegantly draped clothing. Everything about the room is white, furniture, rugs, and the floor under the rugs. The walls are bleached, loose, and nothing grows on them. Only the window displays color. Within this sterile space, in the reflected purple light of the outside, only the boy is obviously alive. Yes, the boy is me. I don't truly remember his name, but I do remember that it had too many rusting letters. Let us therefore call him Hua, the same sound, just padded with all the manner of silent letters and hidden meanings. That's close enough, and appropriately symbolic of, oh, I am angrier than I should be. Fascinating. Let's change tracks, then, to something less fraught. Let us return to the now that will be, and far different here. Now is the now of the stillness, though which with the reverberations of the rifting still echo. The here is not the stillness precisely, but a cavern just above the main lava chamber of a vast, ancient, shield volcano. The volcano's heart, if you prefer, and have a sense of metaphor. If not, this is a deep, dark, barley stable vesicle amid rock that has not cooled much in the thousands of years since Father Earth first burped it up. Within this cavern I stand partially fused with a hump of rocks so that I may better watch for the minute perturbations or major deformations that precede a collapse. I don't need to do this. There are few processes more unstoppable than the one I have set in motion here. Still, I understand what it is to be alone when you are confused and afraid and unsure of what will happen next. You are not alone. You will never be, unless you choose. You so choose. I know what matters here at the world's end. Ah, my love, an apocalypse is a relative thing, isn't it? When the earth shatters, it is a disaster to the life that depends on it. But nothing much to Father Earth. When a man dies, it should be devastating to a girl who once called him father. But this becomes as nothing when she has been called monster so many times that she finally embraces the label. When a slave rebels, it is nothing much to the people who read about it later, just thin words on a thinner paper worn finer by the friction of history. So you were slaves, so what, they whisper, like it's nothing. But to the people who live through a slave rebellion, both those who take their dominance for granted until it comes for them in the end, in the dark, those who would see the world burn before enduring one moment longer in their place. That is not a metaphor, Essen, not a hyperbole. I did watch the world burn. Say nothing to me of innocent bystanders, unearned suffering, heartless vengeance. When a calm builds atop a fault line, do you blame its walls when they inevitably crush the people inside? No, you blame whoever was stupid enough to think they could defy the laws of nature forever. While some worlds are built on a fault line of pain held up by nightmares, don't lament when those worlds fall. Rage that they were built doomed in the first place. So now I will tell you the way that world still ended. I will tell you how I ended it, or at least enough of it that had. I will tell you how I ended it, or at least enough of it that it had to start over and rebuild itself from scratch. I will tell you how I opened the gate and flung away the moon, smiled as I did it, and I will tell you everything of how, later, as the quiet of death descended, I whispered, right now, and the earth whispered back, burn. Chapter 1. Ewan waking and dreaming. Now let's review. You are Essen, the sole surviving origin in all the world who has opened the obelisk gate. No one expected this grand destiny of you. You were once of the Fulcrum, but not a rising star like Alabaster. You were feral, found in the wild, unique only in that you had more innate ability than the average Roga born by random chance. Though you started well, you plateaued early, not for any clear reason. You simply lacked the urge to innovate or the desire to excel. Or so the seniors lamented behind closed doors. Too quick to conform to the Fulcrum system, it limited you. Good thing, because otherwise they'd never have loosened your leash the way they did, sending you forth on that mission with Alabaster. You scared the rust out of them. You, though, they thought you were one of the safe ones, properly broken in and trained to obey, unlikely to wipe out a town by accident. Joke's on them. How many towns have you wiped out by now? One semi-intentionally, the other 3 were accidents, but really, does that matter? Not to the dead. Sometimes you dream of undoing it all, not flailing for the garnet, obelisk, and Aelia, and instead watching happy black children play in the surf of a black sand beach while you bled out around a guardian's black knife, not being taken to Meov by Antony. Instead, you would have returned to the Fulcrum to give birth to Corundum. You would have lost him after that birth, and you would have never had Ion. but both of them would have probably still be alive. Well, for values of alive, if they'd put Kuru in a node. But then you would never have lived in Tiramo, never have borne Uche to die beneath his father's fists, never have raised Nasan to be stolen by her father, never have crushed your once neighbors when they tried to kill you. So many lives saved if only you had stayed in your cage or died on demand. And here, now long free from the ordered, staid strictures of the Falcrum, you have become mighty. You saved the community of Castrima at the coast of Castrima itself. This was a small price to pay compared to the cost in blood that the enemy army would have extracted if they'd won. You'd achieve victory by unleashing the concentrated power of an arcane mechanism older than your written history. And because you are who you are, while learning to master this power, you murdered Alabaster Tenring. You didn't mean to. You actually suspected he wanted you to do it. Either way, he's dead, and the sequence of events has left you the most powerful origin on the planet. It also means that your tenure as most powerful has just acquired an expiration date, because the same thing is happening to you that happened to Alabaster. You're turning to stone. Just your right arm for now. Could be worse. Will be worse. The next time you open the gate, or even the next time you wield enough of that strange, silvery, not origin-y, which Alabaster called magic, you don't have a choice, though. You've got a job due. Courtesy of Alabaster and the Nubilius faction of Stone Eaters who've been quietly trying to end the ancient war between life and Father Earth. The job you have to do is the easier of the two, you think. Just catch the moon, seal the humans' rifting, reduce the current season's predicted impact from thousands or millions of years back down to something manageable, something the human race has a chance of surviving. End the 5th seasons for all time. Job you want to do, though? Find Nasan, your daughter, take her back from the man who murdered your son, and drag her halfway across the world in the middle of the apocalypse. About that, I have good news, and bad news. We'll get to G-Job presently. You're not really in a comm. You're a key component of a complex system, the whole of which has just experienced a massive, poorly controlled startup flux and emergency shutoff, with insufficient cooldown time, expressing itself as an arcanochemical phase state resistance and mutagenic feedback. You need time to reboot. This means you're not unconscious. It's more like periods of half waking and half sleeping, if that makes sense. You're aware of things somewhat, the bobbing of movement, the occasional jostling. Someone puts food and water into your mouth. Fortunately, you have the presence of mind to chew and swallow, because the end of the world on the Astrum Road is a bad time and place to need a feeding tube. Hands pull on your clothing, and something grips on your hips, girds your hips, a diaper. Buy time and place for that, too, but someone's willing to tend you this way, and you don't mind. You barely notice. You feel no hunger or thirst before they give you sustenance. Your evacuations bring no particular relief. Life endures. It doesn't need to do so enthusiastically. Eventually, the periods of waking and sleep become more pronounced things. Then one day you open your eyes to see the clouded sky overhead, swaying back and forth, skeletal branches occasionally occlude it. Faint shadow of an obelisk through the clouds. That's the spinel, you suspect. Reverted to its usual shape and immensity. And the following you like a lonely puppy now that Alabaster is dead. Staring at the sky gets boring after a while, so you turn your head and try to understand what's going on. Figures move around you, dreamlike, swathed in gray-white. No, they're wearing ordinary clothing. It's just covered with pale ash. And they're wearing a lot of clothes because it's cold. Not enough to freeze water, but close. It's nearly 2 years into the season. 2 years without the sun. The riftings put out a lot of heat around the equator, but that's not nearly enough to make up for the lack of a giant fireball in the sky. Still, without the rifting, the cold would be worse. Well below freezing, instead of nearly freezing. Small favors. In any case, one of the ash-swathed figures seems to notice that you're awake, or to feel the shift of your weight. A head wrapped in a face mask and goggles swivels back to consider you, then faces ahead again. There are murmured words between the two people in front of you which you don't understand. They're not in another particular language. You're just half out of it, and the words are potentially absorbed by the ash falling around you. Someone speaks behind you. You start and look back to see another goggled face, masked face. Who are these people? It does not occur to you to be afraid. Like hunger, such visceral things are more detached from you now. Then something clicks and you understand. You're on a stretcher, just two poles with some stretched hide between them, being carried by 4 people. One of them calls out, and the other calls respond from farther away. Lots of calls, lots of people. Another call from somewhere far away, and the people carrying you come to a halt. They glance at each other and set you down with the ease and uniformity of people who've practiced doing the same maneuver in unison many times. You feel the stretcher settle on soft, powdery layer of ash over a thicker layer of ash, over what might be a road. Then your stretcher bears move away, opening packs settling down in a ritual that is familiar from your own months on the road. Break time. You know this ritual. You should get up, eat something, check your boots for holes or stones, your feet for unnoticed sores, make sure your mask. Wait, are you wearing them? If everyone else is. You kept that in your running sack, didn't you? Where is your running sack? Someone walks out of the gloom and ashfall, tall, plateau, broad, identity stripped by the clothes and mask, but restored by the same frizzy texture of the ash-blown mane. She crouches near your head. Not dead after all. Guess I lose that bet with Tonke. Hajarke, you say. Your voice rasps worse than hers does. You guess by the flexing of her mask that she grins. It feels odd to perceive her smile without the unusual undercurrent of menace from her sharp-filed teeth. And your brains are probably still intact. I win the bet with Vika. At least, she glances